I appreciate it. I'm going to let my esteemed panelists make their way up here, but first of all, I want to introduce myself. I am Jack Hogan. I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer of Lifescript. Lifescript is a digital publisher focused in the women's health space. We're the only site on the web that focuses exclusively on women's health issues and deliver content in a voice that women can relate to. I have been involved in the email industry and running our email program at Lifescript for 8 years. I've been to, I think, all but 2 of these Email Insider Summits. So I have, through osmosis, I think, picked up a lot of the battle scars and also insights that hopefully I will be able to draw out from this group here. I think we're missing Nicole still. All right, well, we can do it without her. So let me go ahead and Yeah, I guess so. All right, well, we'll get started.
She's inactive.
What's it? There she is. Hey! She wanted the dramatic entrance. And now that she's up here, I'm going to introduce her. Nicole Delma is the Chief Data Officer at Record Label. Record Label is the daily candy for music. They have, I will eventually work my way over there. Thank you. They are the daily candy for music. They send out 7 daily music newsletters and have an astounding open rate, anywhere between 42 and 86%. She credits the exceptional levels of engagement to the stringent list hygiene and behavioral targeting practices, including proactively downgrading email frequency and pausing subscriptions when users fail to open over a period of time. Nicole, prior to that, was with Condé Nast, where she took the controversial move of cutting their list in half, which resulted in an increase in deliverability, engagement, and revenue, almost overnight, 4 times greater than it was before. So Nicole, I'm going to introduce Jennifer Jones. Jennifer is with Sports Authority. Prior to being with Sports Authority, she was with Merkle. While being at Sports Authority, Jennifer has taken on the task of re-engaging a list of subscribers that had previously, by her prior, the prior person in her position had cut down her list. She has increased the subscriber list by 25% while increasing the ROI goal, maintaining the ROI goals. I'm going to go off of my notes here in a second. So, Della Quist. Della's with Alchemy Works. Alchemy Works has over 65 email specialists focused on a variety of email processes. They work with global brands like Vodafone, Hilton Hotels, Intercontinental, AOL, Getty Images. Della himself, I think you'll find, is a very entertaining speaker. He, for those that know him, I think that you'll get his views on how he sees the world. He's pioneered research in the nudge effect on unopened emails and the surprising effectiveness of using longer subject lines. He personally works with Best Buy, Vodafone, Sony, Hilton, Skype, Lilly, and a number of others. Prior to founding Alchemy Works, Della was in the print, news, and online digital publishing space. And last but not least, Tom Sather. Tom is with ReturnPath. ReturnPath, if you don't know, they help make email work by providing greater insights into deliverability and reputation, certifying legitimate mail, and helping receivers identify spam and phishing. Tom has been in the email space for 15 years. He's worked with ISPs like AOL and AT&T, and as well as the ESP Experian. So this panel, including myself, has a combined experience of about 50 years in the email world. So I expect this to be a very lively conversation. What I'd like to do is I'd like to get the man with the mic to walk around the room. I do expect this to be interactive with the audience, and I do hope that you guys ask questions, because I think there's nothing in this this email space that someone on this panel can't possibly answer the question to. So with that, let me go ahead and define what the issue for this. The title of the panel is When to Let Go. We're looking at how to define your list as active subscribers and inactive subscribers. And for the purpose of this, these are inactives, or people that haven't engaged with your email file for a period of time. So what's the big deal about this? What's the issue about this? Why is this important? Why should we care as email marketers? I think first and foremost, probably the most important place to focus is what the receivers are seeing. On the receiver side, there is some very important reasons to have an engaged list. I'm going to let Tom cover some of this stuff, because at ReturnPath they work quite closely with a lot of the receiver community. Tom, go ahead and tell us, why should we care about this from the ESP's perspective?
Yeah, so the ESPs are really looking at a variety of things. So right now they're moving towards an engagement model to determine whether or not they should be accepting your email and delivering it to the inbox. And they're looking at a variety of things. For example, what's the length of time that a subscriber has actually logged into their account? And I'm not just talking about to the point where they've become fallen off the list and they've been disabled, but we're talking just maybe a few weeks. For example, at Gmail, after I believe 90 days, they will deactivate an account. They won't renew that account, so they're not using engagement, or excuse me, they're not using recycled spam traps for their deliverability. And for those of you who don't know what a spam trap is, it's basically an email address that is set up to catch people that are sending spam. And they come in two flavors. One is a true trap, so that's just set up as never being signed up for anything, and then another is a recycled trap. And those, this is kind of where this panel falls into play. So recycled traps are addresses that once existed. You guys have probably abandoned email addresses before, and then eventually those can get converted into a spam trap. So receivers are really using that to gauge your list quality. So how are you processing bounces? How are you processing inactive users as well? So again, Gmail does that after 90 days. They'll deactivate an account. They won't turn that into a spam trap, because they're using engagement pretty heavily to determine whether or not to deliver mail to the inbox or not. Hotmail will look at 270 days of inactivity before removing an email address from their accounts. And then they can turn that into a spam trap. There is a period of time, though, when they do deactivate that account, they will return an unknown user code. So that just basically tells the mail servers, hey, don't accept mail from this address doesn't exist anymore. And then after, also for Hotmail, after 10 days from the point of sign up, and when I mean point of sign up, when they have applied for a Hotmail account, if there's no activity, they can also remove that address as well. So that could be important for marketers, I think, just because if you're using things like incentives. I know a lot of like flash sale sites, there was one that did an Amazon account, and they had a flood of signups, and a lot of people were just going to Hotmail or Yahoo or Gmail, signing up for an email account to get the discount, and then they would abandon it. So that particular sender could potentially have a lot of spam traps on their file if they didn't process those correctly. And then also at AOL, they do it after 3 months. So after 3 months, they will deactivate an account as well, and they can turn that into a recycled trap.
Great, Tom. That very, very insightful. I can't even hear myself. Very insightful stuff. Now, I think that not just the spam trap fact, but also the latest engagement metrics that a lot of the ISPs are using is probably very relevant to the topic we're covering here. So you've got Gmail's priority inbox, you've got the Microsoft Suite features, you've got a lot of those areas that I think are also important that need to be looked at. So we're not talking about just email addresses that are dead email addresses, but we're talking about the email addresses that are also not engaging with mail. Can you cover that a little bit for us and how that's affecting kind of the way this is shaping up?
Yeah, definitely. So it's definitely Gmail's kind of the I would say the forefront of that. Yahoo and Hotmail and AOL have kind of been experimenting with that, but Gmail is kind of the main driver for engagement filtering. So what they're looking at is how are they interacting with that email? So for example, are they opening that email, actually spending time reading it before deleting it? Are they moving it into a separate folder? Are they just deleting it without reading it? Are they maybe just leaving it in the inbox and reading other things? So they're looking to see where is their attention spent on these emails, and then they're using that determination. If there is a high level of engagement, they will deliver to that to the inbox. If their subscribers, if a majority of subscribers are just ignoring it, they'll say, well, you know what, probably our subscribers don't want it. We're just going to send it to the spam folder. And Gmail, I think, you know, probably you guys have all had this experience of a lot of emails going into the spam folder. You have no idea what to do, and it's probably engagement. And I've worked with a ton of clients where we've segmented out activity, and we've seen, you know, relatively quickly within a couple of weeks that email reached the inbox. Hotmail does this as well, but they do it at a subscriber level. So if I'm opening an email and continually engaging with it, it'll be delivered to the inbox for me. If one of you guys are just deleting without reading it, they'll deliver that to the spam folder. So that's at an individual basis and not particularly at a global level.
Great, very, very helpful. So I think clearly there's an issue in being able to get your mail delivered, get your mail put into the inbox. So I think that is one of the most important areas to focus on for what we're going to be talking about here, but I think there's other perspectives too. I think internally in a corporation, you've got that executive management perspective. I think the traditional list is seen as the larger the file, the more email we send, the more revenue we're going to get. I think and Jennifer has some very good experience here with some different approaches to improve the deliverability is smaller, more engaged lists, better deliverability, more revenue. Now, Jennifer, I think you have some great experience on that front that I'd love to hear what you've done there at Sports Authority.
Sure. Some background will help into what I walked into at Sports Authority. So I joined about a year ago, and I come on in the previous year, the executive management team who really didn't have the depths of email experience decided it would be a great idea to determine who's our active subscribers, and we're just going to mail those people. Generally a good concept of what a lot of us here are talking about today, but what they didn't take into consideration is the effect of what they were creating in the inactive file. So essentially they took about 60 to 70% of our marketing opt-in email database and determined these were inactive people. Now, our corporate structure, we're about 10% of our business is e-commerce, 90% is brick and mortar, so we don't have a lot of email addresses householded to what customers are purchasing online. So really, they did that based on, they determined active based on you were new to file in the last 30 days, you've opened in the last 30, you've clicked in the last 60, so really tightly defining what active is without the consideration of there are people in that now new active list, about 70% of our opt-ins, that they just stopped mailing. So I joined the team about 9 months later. It was shortly after holiday. And of course, their list size had gone down significantly, so to make up for that through holiday, they overmailed all of their actives. So I came into a marketing list that was severely fatigued. I think opt-out rate was up 300%. So we had to go back and revisit, who are our opt-ins? What about this inactive list? And there was change in leadership who was saying, well, what about all of those people that we have a marketing opt-in? Let's mail them. Let's start mailing them with no consideration to the impact and deliverability that they haven't mailed any of these people in 9 months. And a good portion of those people probably should be in the inactive. They weren't engaging. They weren't purchasing. So how do we go through and determine who's the right audience to try to reactivate? So we did that by modeling out our existing active email subscribers and kind of the best model in terms of possible value or potential. And we scored our full inactive and broke them out into deciles and did a test. And the results were pretty amazing in terms of the top 4 deciles in comparing to all 10 deciles. When you compared their deliverability, open, click, unsub rate, it was pretty much consistent across those. But when you looked at actual conversion rate, the top 4 deciles converted about 4 times stronger than the others. And our average order value was 3 times as high. So our model worked. We did identify who was likely to be a valuable subscriber, and then we compared those same deciles to what was our active list, who we had already deemed these are our best people. And our top deciles in our inactive file that we had abandoned, we had walked away from, performed 3 times higher than our active list at that time. So it was a really good exercise in determining it's not just reactivating all of them, but really picking out and testing who are the right people to try to re-engage, who are our subscribers who are spending money in our category and other businesses, and we've just lost their attention.
Great. Well, I think that clearly shows that there's a lot of opportunity in that inactive list, and I think there's a fine line that I think we're kind of defining here. I think there's 2 other perspectives that need to be kind of brought into the table here to make sure that we're really focusing on everything. I think one that's pretty quick and easy to cover is going to be that ESP perspective. I think those that use ESPs rely on them for a lot of help in getting their mail delivered, but I think that there's a bit of an issue with that the ESP's desire to cut your mail down because they're going to get paid less. So I think that you've got to be working with an ESP that has your business's model at heart here. I think the 4th perspective is really probably really the most important one, and that's the consumer perspective. The consumers are going to look at it one of 2 ways. One is they're going to get mail from you that they just don't want anymore, and they may not use the feedback loop mechanism. They may not use the unsubscribe mechanism, but this is clearly going to end up resulting in a negative brand reputation, if not a true negative reputation if they start using some of those things, if you're over-mailing somebody that really doesn't want your mail. But I think the flip side of that is you've got mailers that aren't receiving mail from you and wondering why they're not. And it may be a deliverability problem. It may just be because you're not mailing. So I think that there's this fine line on the consumer's mind as well. And I think at the end of the day, consumers probably don't know what they don't know. So if you don't send them mail, they're not going to understand what you have to offer them and what other value you can bring to them. So I think I want to get a little tactical for a second, and I want to first of all define how we're measuring engagement. And I think that the simplest way that we're looking at engagement here is by the open, or the open rate, or the pixel that's rendered in an email. So typically we're looking at a 1-by-1 pixel that's rendered at the bottom of an email, and that ultimately results in some trigger in a file somewhere that says this particular email address opened. I show of hands real quick in the room, those people that are directly responsible for their email programs. Can I get you to raise your hands? Okay, keep your hands up if you have the ability to measure your email subscribers on an open rate basis on an individual level. Okay, great. Not many hands went down, so I think we don't need to cover too much of some of the tactics of how to do some of this measurement. But I think that we talked in our prep call for this about many of the different other ways we can measure engagement. And oftentimes it's not a direct relationship in the email or the email open rate or the activity that was directly generated from that email. So Nicole, can you give me a little bit of the perspective of what we're talking about here and how other ways that you can measure things?
Sure, absolutely. So as Jack mentioned, I work for Record Label, and we send out 7 daily newsletters that vary from like record label hip hop to record label dance. So they're very niche communications that deliver free daily downloads. When I first came on board, I immediately looked at the file and started to sunset emails that hadn't opened in a year or more, because those were very high-risk names. And I saw a very interesting phenomenon that I actually heard back from people that had never once opened an email, that started to write to us and say, why am I no longer getting your email? This was shocking to me, but I found out that people were engaging with our communications strictly through the subject line, because in our subject line we list out the artists that would be featured, and that was their call to action, basically to go onto the site, log in, and then download the music that they wanted to get for free that day. And I've heard, through anecdotal stories that Groupon, Guilt, other companies like that, especially in the daily business, also see a lot of engagement that happens as a result of the email, but doesn't actually take place within that email at all. So there's no open, there's no click activity, but it's still a vital way to bring that consumer onto the website. And so that was a really perplexing problem for me. And so we started to implement different tracking that allowed us to look at the way that people were behaving within 10 minutes, 15 minutes of receiving the email, and then going onto the website. So that was not an easy thing to do. We had to change our structure so that we had required login, which was also a big barrier for a lot of the people that were going onto our site. But ultimately, the analytics that we were able to gain as a result allowed us to sunset the people that were truly disengaged and were not looking at the subject line, not engaging with the site in any way, shape, or form, and take them off the list and give them an opportunity to re-engage if they wanted to. Sort of a second story that's similar to that, and I should say that I'm the first person to cut a list anywhere that I go, but I want to look at both sides of it. When I was at Getty Images, we saw a similar situation where we had people that were on the list for 2 years, 3 years, as many as 10 years, and hadn't made any sort of purchase with us. And the marketing response to that was, let's mail them more. We should be sending them more offers. We need to give them a deeper discount. We should give them more sexy subject lines. And it turned out that these were people that were not in a position of buying power and never would be, but they were heavy influencers on the buying decision. So the email messages that we were sending to these consumers were incredibly valuable to them. They were making the art selection, looking at the images, but they would never show up in our file based on the tracking that we'd implemented as a purchaser. And so the effort to try and convert these people was sort of a lost cause. However, by drawing sort of relational tables through companies and relationships with individuals throughout an organization, we were able to tie these types of relationships back, that the open and that level of engagement and the click ultimately resulted in a conversion for that corporation down the road. So that was another situation in which email open rate or click rate wasn't a clear indicator of engagement.
Excellent. Well, I think that obviously open is clearly a simple, I think, Della, you had a great way of putting this. If you have a good open rate, it just shows that you know how to write a really good subject line. Was that the comment that you made?
No. No. I'll come back to subject lines in a moment. I think that I have to give my disclaimer first and foremost. When I talk and the things I say, I'm speaking to people who work for reputable brands, great companies, who are trying to do their best and run opt-in programs, okay? So hands up anyone here who works for a crap brand. Okay, none? How many people here really just don't care about their program? Right. So the final disclaimer is just don't be stupid, right? The only thing that people do or use as why you should take people off your list or whatever it is they give really random, stupid examples like, oh yeah, I once knew someone who bought a list of 2 million names for $1, right? And they uploaded it, and of course they had deliverability problems. That's just stupid. So everyone here in this room is on the same page as me. Don't give me examples that are stupid because I won't listen to them. Am I entertaining? Not sure. So basically, the thing about inactives is there's only 2 reasons that anybody says take an inactive off the list. I've been listening to this forever. Number 1 is it might impact your deliverability. You'll get into the spam folder. Number 2 is cost. Okay? Now, if getting into the spam folder is your problem, then inactivity isn't the problem. It's your data collection. You made a big mistake months ago, years ago, right? Or you did something stupid. You went and took your inactives or unsubscribed and mailed to them. That's the only 2 reasons. And as for cost, that just makes me laugh. This is probably the only channel where the unit cost of sending a message to someone is nearly 0, right? It's nearly 0 to send an extra message. So the 2 main reasons that anyone could give that have any credibility for inactivity or not mailing people, as far as I'm concerned, if you're a good brand with an opt-in list that has good practices, are meaningless. And if you consider the wastage in TV and press and radio and then compare it to the wastage in email, it's nearly 0. So the 2 main reasons that anybody could give of credibility, I just don't buy, okay? So now we have the second part, and I thought I was going to be against everybody on the panel. But both Nicole and Jennifer have actually said the people you think are inactive are not necessarily inactive, oftentimes. And if you look deeply and carefully, you will find out that you're impacting them in a lot of ways, and you need to start working on that relationship. So your list consists of two different types of people. The highly engaged who open and click on a regular basis, or at least more than once a year, right? And the people who engage with you through other channels but are comfortable on your list. I call them unemotionally subscribed, right? They're on your list. It's not a big deal. They don't mind deleting or ignoring it. But the nudge effect, the prompt, makes them come to your site via another channel. And anyone who knows what they're talking about sends a big email out to their whole list. Blasts, let's use that. We'll see huge increase in traffic from other channels. There'll be an uplift in affiliates, there's an uplift in search, there's an uplift in direct to your website, there's an uplift in pretty much everything. So the challenge is, and this is where we come to subject lines, the challenge is you've got part of your list that you don't know enough about to be clever with, right? How can you segment and target to someone who hasn't spoken to you? Okay, and then you've got the engaged. So keep doing your segmentation and targeting with the engaged people. Be really, really smart, be really clever, make them spend $100 and then $150 and then $200, cross-sell, upsell. No one says don't do that. But you have to think about the unengaged as more of a media model, right? It's more like advertising, it's more like TV advertising. And everybody who's done media marketing knows that in order to get someone to change their behavior, they have to see the message more than once. So reach as many people as possible, and frequency, more than 5 or 6 times to get them to pick up the phone or get them to open and click on the email, and that's what we see all the time. So in effect, you're running 2 strategies. Your clever segmentation and targeting using the wonderful tools that your ESP provide you. There's lots of ESP sponsors here. I'm not saying their products are irrelevant. I'm saying they're only active, they're only useful in people who engage with you regularly or choose to engage with you via email. The others, you have to use a subject line strategy, right? Let me give you an example. You send an email out that says great deals in store this weekend on a Friday. You don't have to open that to know that when you go to the mall, you walk past that store, there's going to be great deals in there. And if I'd called it Twitter, and I said, hey, I've got 5 million followers, hey, do you want us to tweet to that list? Everyone would be all over it. Right? And yet you have a list of 5 million people, and you're sending them a 140-character subject line, and you're going, oh my God, that didn't work. Why? Is it because email is boring? Or is it because Twitter is so exciting that we lose our mind every time we think about social? So you do, don't you? Social, oh, that's so exciting. Email, oh, that's so dull. So that's the point. The point about it is we need to operate 2 separate strategies. One is a media strategy where you're accepting the fact that silence doesn't mean I hate you or I'm a spam trap. And the question is, if you like a brand and you purchase with them online, why would you give them an email address that you throw away after a week? The question when you're collecting data is to make sure you get the prime email address of somebody and you're a good enough brand that they're not suspicious enough of you that they don't go and create a throwaway Gmail account and then buy with that. That's just dumb because they won't get the confirmation address, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the point. In actives, when someone doesn't engage with, they don't open and click, it's not the same thing as saying I hate you, okay? And all day we've been hearing when your customer tells you something, do it. Right? If they don't tell you something, don't do it. That's the same thing. And they don't tell you, I want to be off the list, and you take them off the list. That's just dumb. I don't agree with that. Thank you.
Tom, any responses to the number of points that Della made?
Yeah, so I think everything he says is valid, but I think it's all very theoretical. I think a lot of marketers
I love this.
Well, I think to your point, yeah, if you're doing everything great from the beginning, if you have a strong opt-in program, and if you're, cleaning out your list properly, through the entire lifetime of your subscribers in your list, then great. You're not going to have any problems. No need to deactivate your list. Probably.
Like everyone in this room, because I asked for a show of hands.
Well, I mean, really, how many of you guys have walked into a situation like Jennifer, where you walk into a new job and they add 12 months of inactive addresses. They, the CMO says, hey, what are these all these bounce files doing around? Like, we could monetize this. They see $signs, they mail to it, and they run into problems. Or if you're moving from ESP to ESP, or ESP accidentally gives you your bounce file in with your regular file, and now you have a problem. So I think everything you say is theoretically good, but I don't see that happening in the real world very often.
Yeah, I was going to say, anyone else want to jump in on this?
If I could jump in, and you almost have me sold, Della. You're that good. But if we all could, imagine for a minute Della being in charge of your mobile program and the number of texts that you might get. that's a contract that you've also engaged in with different brands, and it's still a very one-to-one for the most part. And at one point in time, email was that way. I remember my mom first signed up for her AOL account years ago. She maybe got 3 messages a week, and everything was so exciting to get it. And we've evolved beyond that to where all of us have multiple email addresses, and we're getting, you know, tons of email from brands that we recognize that we're just not engaged in. And we're all here working in the email industry for the most part, and it's an industry that's going through some major changes right now. We're looking at the CPM models. We're looking at the fact that it's become so commoditized that those numbers have been driven down. I've seen CPMs a fourth of what they were a few years ago because of the competition in that space. If we want to support email, you know, as a business moving forward, I think that we collectively need to make some pretty dramatic changes in the way that we're approaching email, and that, you know, we all look at it and we all talk about best practices, and I think that in theory best practices are great. How many of us do them all the time? I know myself that, you know, there's probably 70% of the time that I follow best practices and another 30% where you just need to get something done. And that 30% is growing and expanding. And if I looked at my inbox today, there's probably 50 messages already from brands that I do have a relationship and I am somewhat engaged in, but I'm not going to do anything more than look at the subject line. And I think if we collectively start to make some reforms and start to email in a more smart and direct fashion, that we can actually kind of save an industry that's going through some turmoil right now.
Okay, so, I think that very good points, but I think we really need to look at Della's view, Tom's view, I think theoretical, actual, practical. But I think in the middle here, where we've actually solved some problems by investigating our inactive list and actually finding and testing, I think to support Della maybe a little bit, Tom, you know, if you have an inactive file, is it okay to use that a couple of times, a few times, to actually go dig into and find those people that you may be able to get to re-engage you? If you're, you know, measuring that list correctly, you know, how is that going to affect you? Is there a one strike and you're out rule here, or?
So it all depends, right? So it's over a period of time. It's not that you send once to an unengaged file and they're causing deliverability issues for you. If you're hitting a spam trap, yes, it could immediately cause issues, especially at, you know, blacklists like Spamhaus or you know, at any of the ISPs. So that could cause issues. But at that point, you know, the address doesn't exist. It's not even a point of being unengaged anymore.
Okay, so that's kind of Della's just don't do something stupid.
Right, and I think the other thing we didn't talk about are just complaint rates. So when your subscribers are marking your emails as spam, a lot of times after a certain period of time of no activity, they want to unsubscribe. And I think Sherpa gave a stat like 60% of people are using the report spam button as a way to unsubscribe from email. So after a period of time of no activity and not reading your emails and ignoring it, they want to unsubscribe. It's cluttering up their inbox. They'll use that to report spam. I've done analysis on complaints for a variety of mailers, and I see it range from, you know, 3 months to 12 months to 24 months when subscribers start to report spam more often, and that causes deliverability issues. So I think you know, if you look at your complaint file too, you can look at the subscribers and, you know, try to create a profile of who's going to complain more, who may be disengaged, and remove those, as opposed to you know, like what we're talking about, just removing swaths of subscribers from your file.
Okay, Della?
This is really interesting. Last night I was having a really calm conversation in the bar with a couple of people, and one of the things that came up was about, where's the data to support it, right? I mean, so I'm going to throw that question, where's the data to support it? The only data that we've seen actually supports my point, that inactives are not that inactive. The vast majority of them are just unemotionally subscribed to your program, okay? So any data that you see will support that. I can give you a ton of examples. We have a client, and we monitored it for 3 years, right? So all the people in 2008 who did not open a single email, for this particular client, something like 18% of their online revenue or their email revenue in 2009 came from people who didn't open in 2008. And 8% of the 2010 revenue came from people who didn't open a single email in 2008 and 2009. Now, I'm not saying everybody has that, but I'm just saying this is just an example. 8% of your total online revenue is a big amount to throw away. I don't know many people who are in an economy that can live with that.
Sorry, so just one question, because I agree with what you're saying, but it's true, I would say, with a lot of smaller or mid-tier mailers. But the problem that we see with especially large mailers, you know, multi-millions of people that they're mailing, and that inactive list representing a huge percentage of overall ISP volume becomes important to the ISPs. And Tom and I deal with this all day long, where you've got these clients that have blocking issues because they're mailing to, I agree with you, they're probably emotionally unsubscribed and they're providing value somewhere, but they're providing a negative value on the email list because they're causing the marketers to get blocked and not get in the inbox. And then obviously their inbox rates are going down, so the revenue on their macro email program is down 10, 20% because they're getting bulk. So how do you sort of account for what you're saying where, okay, 8% of the people are, you know, from 2008 are driving revenue in 2009?
No, 8% of their revenue comes from
Okay.
people who didn't.
Okay, but what about, how do you account for the 15% of revenue that's getting affected because they're getting 80% inbox delivery versus 100%?
Sorry, who do you work with?
Responses.
You're with
And
Responses.
by the way, an ESP who does say lower volume by all means, so I don't think that's a fair statement. But.
Right. That's really good because I wanted to bring in the Responses, your new white paper or
Right.
survey on retailers mailing to people.
Yeah.
Fantastic white paper in one sense, and it ignored the elephant in the room, which really surprised me. So the white paper, I don't know if anyone knows this, basically Responses signed up to a bunch of retailers and then were active for a bit, opened and clicked for a bit, and then quit, right? And they were silent for 40 consecutive months, right? Now that white paper talks about a lot of stuff. It talks about how many retailers quit mailing after a while. It talks about how many people tried to reactivate. It talks about all kinds of stuff. Now, to know that, what would you have had to have done? You would have had to have gone into the inbox to look at it and see what happened. And do you know the one thing you didn't talk about? How many were in the junk folder? And my view is the reason you didn't talk about it was almost nobody. They were getting in the inbox. If it was, you'd have come out and said 50% of retailers end up in the junk folder after 9 months, 6 months, 2 years. And it just defies belief that the one thing that everybody's interested in, you didn't talk about. So you made the point that you want to make, which is it resonates with everyone. Don't pummel your email subscribers. Consumers hate email. Fear and self-loathing in email marketing. It's endemic and it pisses me off, right? Consumers don't give a damn, it's only an email, right? They watch TV commercials all the time. I can name check feminine hygiene products all the time. No one sits down and goes and says, I'm being pummeled with irrelevant advertising. It's called media. It's called branding. So the point about DM and direct response, it's about people you know. And I challenge you Responses to go out, look in the inbox, and publish how many went into the junk folder, at what stage they started going into the junk folder, and put something meaningful out there that doesn't make everyone go, send less email. And by the way, I never at any stage said, be stupid, and to your inactives, just send them hundreds of emails. All I said was keep them on the program and do the quality stuff that you would do for your actives, send it to your inactives. Every single one of those people who then engages, you cannot re-engage someone that you're not talking to, right? You just can't. So taking them off the list, to me, is the quickest way to make sure they never engage with you again, and that's done.
Ryan.
Okay, Ryan.
I want to go back to Heather's question because you didn't answer. Heather's question was, Heather's question was, you're sending to an audience and you're risking deliverability for a lot of people on that list by saying that it's branding or saying that you're not going to look at these metrics. But you're sacrificing an engaged audience. So how do you overcome that?
You're not risking deliverability, and that's the thing. For the people in this room, if you're a good brand, here's the thing that's really funny, right? There's a consumer survey that we sponsored in the UK by the DMA, and it's basically tracking consumer attitudes. And it's how you ask the question. The survey used to ask a question, and the question was, how many emails do you get in your inbox that are relevant? And like 70% of the people said, less than 10% of the emails that I get in my inbox are relevant, okay? So we took over the study, and I knew that that study was set up to pander to our fear and self-loathing. We're masochists, we love it, right? So we asked the question, how many emails do you get from brands you trust, right? And the number, surprisingly, it's well over 20, right, a week. And you go, oh my God, that's 20 whole emails a week. That's only 3 a day in a 7-day week, and 4 a day in a 5-day week. That's nothing compared to the total number of emails. So we then said, How many emails from brands you trust are interesting or relevant? And do you know more than 50% of them said between 1 in 3 and 1 in 2 emails from brands they get are relevant? And the consumer's view about the email they get is driven by their reaction with a brand. Do a survey, ask your audience what percentage of your list, right? How do you feel about the brand? And the people who are likely to promote the brand will severely underestimate the volume of emails they get from that brand. And the people who don't like that brand severely overestimate the number of emails they get from the brand. Email is the tail and not the dog. If you've got a crap brand and you do something really stupid out there in the big world, it will impact how people feel about your email badly. And if you're a great company with great customer service who loves their customers and is respectful of their customers everywhere else, you underestimate how many emails you get. You'll go, I get 1 a month, when you're actually getting 2 a day. And that's the point. That's an extreme example. I get a load of Expedia emails, and I thought I got 1 a week. And then I looked in my inbox, and it's actually 4 a week. But to me, I need those emails, and I thought it was only 1 a week. And that's what really happens.
All right, next question.
I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm through.
Morgan, I tried to keep it not become the Della show, but
I'm
he just
sorry.
can't help himself.
Della knows I love him, but I have another question after you.
Isn't it also, I mean, we tend to have an agreement that email drives activity beyond just the open, that there's a branding, that there's I see it now and I purchase this weekend, I don't have to open it.
So isn't the real issue here the issue that we're incredibly lazy as an industry in demanding attribution? And I'm demanding that, I mean, how hard would it be to link this person got an email and he went and bought in the store? How hard is that to do? And then we have an argument to go back to the ISPs and say, hey, these people aren't inactive. Look at the number of people who purchase who haven't opened. So why isn't anyone on the panel advocating that we do a better job of attribution? I mean, I'm railing about that all the time. And again, I think as an industry, we're enormously lazy in that regard.
But Chris, I don't think the ISPs care. I mean, I think at the end of the day, they don't care that our files are inactive or not active. They're going to look at us across the board, right? They're going to look at us and say, you know what, we've found by statistics that we have happier people that are going to stay a subscriber of Gmail if they have people that are engaged in email, right? I mean, I think that's probably, I don't think it's that we're lazy. I think that it's a big problem. I think it's a challenge that faces every one of us in this room of how do we, first of all, look at it and say, we have an engaged audience, whether it's by open rate or click rate or download rate or login rate, but then how do we apply that to getting our mail delivered? I think that, you've heard some opinions on the panel up here of how that affects us. Nicole, you look like you wanted to respond to
No,
that too.
I think it's interesting. I've often toyed with the idea of a different ISP that was strictly for marketing, and in which you got a lot of value out of receiving those messages and marketing messages. And with the launch of apps like Shopkick, there's proof that people are interested in getting relevant messages at the right time. I think that the fact that we're mixing those messages with messages that come from our boss and our family and everything else in the same inbox and treating them the same and applying the rules across very different types of communications with very different intent is part of the problem. But I absolutely advocate looking at all the different types of behavior that's connected to email. At Getty also we found a great program in which we took unengaged emails and we actually put the telemarketers on to call these people. And then we saw this tremendous response that certain people just don't respond to email. They're not interested in engaging with you that way. And so you could send them 1 million emails and they're still not going to look at them or give them the thought that you'd like them to.
So I think, the question that I have is that I think, Della, what you were basically saying is, look, there's 2 types of strategies you're going to take here. Although, I guess my basic question is, and I think I know the answer, I know my take, but is there ever a time that you should be removing inactive subscribers? I mean, just down the line, and then how do you actually identify the ones that you should be removing? And I'd like to...
Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes, but very few people here in this room have ever got close to that point in time to even understand it. So we're just talking off feelings and saying, oh, I think that this is a good idea, or I think 1 year is too much, or I think 2 years is too much. And that's the big problem. And as to the attribution stuff, I do a lot of it, and because I do a lot of attribution, that's why I can stand here and say what most people would be scared to say, is because I know the answer, and the answer is email is driving more engagement. I would say 50% of all interaction on the web is email and everything else is the rest. Because everybody uses email to drive. Facebook uses it, Twitter uses it, Google uses, everybody uses email, and I think it's driving most of the clicks. And as far as the ISPs are concerned, ISPs aren't stupid. We just have to think about this rationally. Do you know what the click rate is on spam, right? The click rate on spam, the number one is pornography. It's about 5%. Unbelievable, isn't it? They get 5% clicks on spam from porn. The next best is Rolex watches, which is about 1/3 of 1%. And the one after that is pharmaceuticals, human growth hormone, libido-enhancing products, et cetera, et cetera. I'm being very polite here. That's the next, and that's even an order of magnitude below that. Now, if an ISP can't tell the difference, by the way, if you're getting a click rate of 1/3 of 1%, you deserve to be junked. ISPs can tell the difference. If they couldn't tell the difference, 1 in 5 of the emails I send you would be blocked, right? They can tell the difference. They know the difference. And we are just tying ourselves up in knots without understanding the numbers. And if you can't tell the difference between 1/3 of 1% click rate and an industry average for retail of about 3 or 4%, then that ISP deserves to be out of existence, and that is not the case. So I'm sorry. I mean, I don't mean to hog it, but it's like, it's me against, it's alone against Rome is how I feel sometimes.
So I've got a quick question. So at what point would you say that a customer should be marked as inactive? You said at the beginning that you have the experience and you know how. What is that process for you to say, Mary is no longer going to be a benefit to me on my email list?
Here's the tactic. Split your list in two. Take the inactives who haven't engaged for a year, right? As in, you don't have to split it in two. Monitor them, right? And then you've got your engaged list. And every time someone becomes active from the inactive list, put them in the engaged, and after 1 year, take them out and put them there. So the first thing will happen is you'll immediately understand the ROI on your inactive list. It will change your mind in a heartbeat, right? The second thing is keep looking. And we had a client, and the reason I came onto this is one of our clients refused to take my advice. I used to say this crap too. I went to my client and says, you've got 50% of your list haven't engaged for a year, take them off your list. And the guy refused. He said, are you nuts? So I said, let's do this. And we watched it, and we watched, and we watched. And after a while, we stopped putting the unengaged back into it, and we just ran down that list. And after about 3 or 4 years, what actually happened was every single open became an unsubscribe, right? So the ROI on the inactive list went to 0. And at that point, I said, that list is truly dead. I have the proof. Not one person has bought off that list for 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is. So the problem I've got, Ryan, is that everybody's number is different. So there's almost an it depends element within it. But the problem I've got is no one has come close to really understanding the numbers, and they just randomly pick a date because it feels good, or their CEO says it's a good idea, or their CMO says it's a good idea, and they don't know what they're talking about. Sorry.
I would say that some people have looked at the numbers, and you know, at Condé Nast, for example, we literally did see a quadrupling of our revenue as a result of cutting the file in half. That's a company that was known for sending quite a number of emails, for example. But I think in answer to your question, it really depends on what you're selling. Are you a publisher? Are you selling, you know, a $200,000 product? Are you selling a $6 magazine subscription? And then it becomes a very different proposition. And so you really need to look at your business model and the risk associated with becoming blocked. I mean, at Condé Nast on, you know, Black Friday, every single one of our 28 ISPs or IPs was blocked. And it was because one small unit was sending out, and they decided to block us based on the physical address that was in the bottom of the email. And we couldn't figure out why, and track that back to having to migrate. We actually migrated over to Silver Pup overnight, and, you know, 28 IP addresses was a tremendous challenge. And I think that, you know, to answer the question, you really need to look closely at your business model and then assess from there.
I'm going to address this question to Nicole and Jennifer. And Danny, you can respond afterwards. We've talked a lot so far about using email as an engagement tool for people who've already interacted with your brand and to bring them back, extend the value of that person. Can you talk a little bit about email as an acquisition tool? And Del, I'll agree with your comment. I mean, you buy a bad list, shame on you. I mean, the inevitable is going to happen. You've talked about taking lists, modeling, deciles, A/B testing. So perhaps as brand owners, talk a little bit about email as an acquisition.
Sure. Are you speaking more about external lists? So list rental and that type of email acquisition, or working through your own subscribers?
Potentially external, but I'll leave that to you. I mean, if you can talk about your experiences and either or.
Sure. You know, with regards to external lists and list rental, list exchange, co-reg, that was a fundamental part of the strategy at Condé Nast. I mean, magazine subscriptions, it was tremendously beneficial. Without those relationships, I mean, we probably would have lost a third of the subscription revenue, which translates into, you know, quite a bit more in advertising dollars. So it was, you know, as it, you know, transferred from direct mail, very quickly, as soon as you sign up, you know, with a card, even if you don't provide your email address, you should expect that we're going to go, at that company, we were going to go out and find your email address very quickly. To the degree at one point I had to deal with someone that was actually in witness relocation, and he called us because he was so concerned about the fact that we'd gotten his accurate email and his address and traced it back to him. So in that, you know, but it was worth that much to us that we would invest $20, $40 to find your email, market to you, and try to sell you other subscriptions because you as a consumer were worth that much in advertising dollars. At Getty Images, we applied the acquisition strategy, but across, I mean, that was part of what they did was acquire other companies, and the reason for that was the data. That's what I was hired in to do, was they basically bought the customers, and then they cross-marketed to them because they realized their product was too premium for a lot of you know, the existing consumers, and so they bought Jupiter Images and Photos.com and ClipArt with the notion that they were, you know, specifically going to go after those customers and use them for acquisition. So that was actually a very core part of the email strategy that I had to implement. We looked very carefully at not cannibalizing a list and not downselling someone that might be a premium customer, and that proved to be a very interesting way to segment the audience. Where I'm at now, email acquisition is not something that we would look to do outside of our own list, but we will cross-promote you know, additional things to the consumer that's already engaged. So if someone's in, you know, opening a lot of emails that are focused on hip-hop, we'll then reach out to them specifically and you know, on behalf of an advertiser, put an offer in front of them that ties back to that particular genre.
Okay, we have one last question. We've let this panel go on a little bit over, as some of you noticed, but that is conscious. But we have Stephen here is going to ask the final question to this panel, and we'll go on to the next one.
So a little more practical approach. Let's say I go with Della's approach and just mail everybody. And then I run into the issue, hey, my deliverability is going down. So question for you, Tom, like, how long does it take to remedy? Because if it's just an issue of like dumping half the inactives and 2 weeks later I'm back to being fully delivering, then I don't see it as a huge problem.
It could take you know, weeks, you know, if not months, to improve your reputation from doing something like that. But I think, you know, to Della's point, I would probably agree with a lot of what he said. But I think too, there's a lot of, you know, caveats there too. Like, how are you know, when we were talking about, you know, an opt-in list. So are we just talking about signing on, you know, via the website? What about point of sale signups? I noticed a lot of problems with engagement there because a lot of people, you know, maybe just a little bit too shy to say, no, I don't want to give you my email address. As a result, they start receiving those. Engagement gets lower. They complain more. Things start to happen badly. So, so I think there's a lot of, you know, I see on the Twitter stream here, there's the whole "it depends" statement. But I think there are a lot of factors that, you know, depend on if you should remove an unengaged subscriber. I don't think everyone needs to do it. I don't think we need to be so heavy-handed with that, but I also think that if you are having deliverability issues, if you have an old file, if you're new in a position where you've had problems with it, I think it's time to look at that. But I don't think everyone needs to say, I'm going to remove an address after, you know, 3 months or 6 months. I think that's pretty ridiculous. I think you need to look at your own data. I think marketers too need to kind of move beyond opens and clicks as well, because that doesn't give the entire picture. The ISPs are absolutely looking at things beyond that. So I think marketers need to look beyond that too.
Any final thoughts, Jack? Throw you under the bus.
It depends. No, I mean, I think that, you know, clearly what I think we've defined here is that it really clearly does matter what type of mailer you are, what type of subscribers you have, what type of data analytics you're going to employ. And I think that if you do all those things and you can figure out all those things, you know, you may end up in Della Bliss, where you can email at will and, you know, carpet bomb your list however you want to. But I don't think he's really saying that.
Emotive word, carpet bomb.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask that we thank this panel right now, and